Hey, hello, what's up, and welcome into this week's episode of the Geek Garage podcast. I am Ted, joined as always by show founder David. Say hello, David.
Hey, Ted, how are you doing? Wow, that's a little too much excitement for what we got going on today, so I apologize right off the bat.
Not accepted. Moving right along, now that David's ruined the mood, or brought it up and ruined it, none of this matters. Yes, David is correct. That is a little too much excitement for what's going on today because it is all bad,
Yeah,
basically.
nothing good.
Nothing good. This week we are unfortunately doing an episode called "The Death of Movie Theaters?" Question mark. Because it's looking like that's going to be the case. But before we get to that, David, hit him with some show notes.
Sure. So, first up, like always, the first couple of things we got going on are for people that have not tuned into the podcast for a while or are brand new to the podcast. So we just recently launched our Etsy shop. We have some merch as well as some cool stickers on there. It is called Geek Garage Gear because we're fans of alliteration. So if you'd like to check us out on Etsy, you can search for Geek Garage Gear or click the link in the show notes below. You can find us and go buy some cool stuff and support the podcast. You can follow us on social media, as always, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. However, the best way to stay up to date with the goings on with the podcast, aside from listening to our weekly episodes, is through the Facebook group. It's called Geek Garage Podcast Fans and Listeners. There will be a link for that as well in the description. What we do is basically conduct some nerdy polls and other fun, geeky conversations. This week, or so far this month, it's all been horror themed stuff, appropriate for the month.
Yes, the cereal poll was in fact horrifying in and of itself.
No, well, hey, to be fair, people did talk about their favorite spooky themed cereals. We did get a lot of that. So, but yeah,
All right, good point. I'll allow it.
aside from the cereal poll questionnaire thing that we threw up there, it's all been, spooky conversation topics. But yeah, anyways, going forward, if you'd like to interact with us on social media and participate in those fun nerdy polls and conversations, follow us at the link below in the description. If you'd like to support the show, there is a couple ways to do that. Please subscribe to the podcast if you have not already. If you have, thank you. If you have not, shame on you. Unless this, of course, your first time listening to the podcast, then you should most definitely subscribe. We also appreciate ratings and reviews where applicable. We know that not all podcast apps offer them, but I actually did some research yesterday to figure out which apps offer some sort of rating and review system. Apple Podcasts is pretty much the gold standard, really, when it comes to anything podcasting. Like Spotify is looking to gun them down, but as of right now, Apple Podcasts is still holding strong in the lead of just the gold standard when it comes to podcasts. And of course, they are one of the few that you can leave ratings and reviews on. You can also leave a rating and review on Castbox, Podchaser, Stitcher, and Podcast Addict. But of course, if you'd like to just straight up subscribe to the podcast and not worry about reviews and ratings and all that other bullshit that kind of helps us out in the long run, which is why we ask you to do it anyways, you could just subscribe. So whatever. If you are interested in supporting the show in ways that cost you a couple doll hairs a month, you can follow the link below, also in the description, to our Patreon page. Our Patreon donors get a couple of really neat perks, like a button and sticker set that's exclusive to donors. They get their name up on our Patreon Wall of Donors page on the website that lists you and your side hustle if you have one. And you get cool updates on and behind the scenes stuff on a weekly basis for what's going on with the podcast and what's coming up later on in the month and all that cool stuff. So if tiers start at $2 and $5, so if it's not that much money. If you'd like to get involved with that, we greatly appreciate it. But yeah, back to you, Ted.
All right, well, you've certainly convinced me to donate
Support
money.
the podcast.
Support the podcast and donate money. Not really, but yeah. definitely thank you to everyone who is currently a patron. We are doing useful things with your money so far as you know, and that's all you need to know. If you would like to join, as David said, you can do all that. We're very excited for all of your doll hairs. We want
Yeah.
1 million doll hairs, in fact, but that's not even nor there.
I mean, for the most part, your funds have basically gone into buying your own stuff.
Yes.
Like the buttons and the
Congratulations, you
t-shirt.
gave us $5 a month for a 35-cent button. Great investment. They actually cost more than that, but I don't know how much.
Yeah.
None of this matters. We're going to edit that out. David, make a note to edit that out.
Okay.
All right. As I said at the top of the episode, we are going to unfortunately be covering the second closing now of movie theaters, the second shutdown of the movie theater industry, which I am afraid, and some people that are more in the know than I am are also afraid is going to be the last one. They don't see movies coming back. So probably going to be a pretty depressing episode for those of you out there that like the movie theater, like David and I do. So we'll try and keep it light, but basically the world is ending. David, hit the music. All right, so David, like I said, we are going to try and keep this as upbeat and quote unquote positive as
We're
we
gonna
possibly
try.
can, but there's no promises because, like I said, the world is ending.
Mm-hmm.
Quick recap for those of you that aren't in the know. Last Friday, October the 2nd, MGM announced that they were again delaying the release of the new Bond movie, which I believe is called No Time to Die. David, correct?
That is correct.
Right. This has had basically every release date possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think at last count, this is what, the 5th or 6th release date that this movie has been assigned.
At least, yeah.
So
It's been. I mean, it's definitely not the only movie to have
Sure.
multiple release dates up until this point, but yeah, it's definitely been pushed back a few times.
Yeah, some of them not even COVID related. That was last Friday. On Saturday, October the 3rd, Regal announced the possibility of a worldwide indefinite shutdown. Creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Monday, the 5th, they were like, yeah, fuck it, we're closing. Thursday, October the 8th, deal with it. End of business day, we're shutting it down.
Yeah, I like to think that basically that announcement on Saturday was like the start of a very brief game of chicken between them and like MGM and a few other like big movie, I don't know, what do you call them? Studios. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about that, David. The movie theaters lose every time in that game of chicken. I'm not saying that's not what it was. I'm just saying it makes no sense whatsoever because their business and their success is predicated upon people being there.
Right.
The movie studios can sell DVDs and streaming. So theaters lose every time. Yeah. We'll circle back to that. I have some thoughts. First, a quick recap of films that are delayed. This is by no means supposed to be comprehensive because at this point, I don't think anybody outside of maybe the top, studio heads and some of their upper level management really knows, or really know what all movies are going to be delayed. But some that have been announced. First is Black Widow. That has been pushed back to next May 2021.
Yeah, I was. Well, you were the one who told me about this. Like like we said a few minutes ago. What was it? No Time to Die wasn't the first movie to be pushed back several times. Case in point, Black Widow. This is another one. It was due out May of last year, and then it got pushed back to, I believe, October, November, and then you texted me the other day, and I was like, "Well, I'm gonna go jump in oncoming traffic," and I was like, "Yeah, it kind of is. I can wait. It's gonna suck. I can wait, but I didn't want to bring that bad news to my wife, like, and I didn't."
Yes. So, Lindsay, if you're listening, we just made that up. It's still coming out as scheduled. Next up is No Time to Die. Like I said, that has been delayed now to April 2nd, 2021. I anticipate by the time you listen to this podcast, that will have been delayed to, I don't know, like 2040. The Heat Death of the Universe, somewhere in that range.
Right. Daniel Craig's going to be rolling out the red carpet on a walker.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He'll be rolling out a fucking electric wheelchair.
Right.
A Quiet Place Part Two, which April 23rd, 2021. It's gonna be real loud by then.
What was that supposed to be a funny?
Yes, you can edit that out. It's fine. And then finally,
I thought it was pretty funny.
Spiral, which isn't that the next Saw movie? Isn't that the
Yeah,
Saw reboot?
I think it's supposed. Yeah, the start of the Saw reboot.
Yeah. Thank you, whoever decided that was a thing we needed, and go fuck yourself. That's May 21.
I mean, like it's got Chris Rock, so it should at the very least be interesting.
Yeah, yes, interesting is a word to describe it. Yeah. I have never liked Saw all that much.
I like the first one. Everything else was like just pure torture porn, and
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just not into
boring.
that.
Yeah.
I'm not into that subgenre. I mean, I liked the first Hostel, but just like Saw, like
David,
the
you're admitting a lot of things that you didn't have to tell anyone.
okay, well, you know what? I'll just go fuck myself.
You could have just kept that shame deep down bottled inside where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, if people want to give me a hard time for not being into torture porn horror, then
No, no,
they
I
can.
fully agree with you on that aspect of it. Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So after that, we have the ninth Fast and the Furious movie. I think it's just called F9. So
Yeah,
great
it's called yeah,
F.
F9.
I mean, great titling. That they
Nine
just
Fast, Nine Furious.
yeah they there's just all the other titles were taken
Yeah.
basically. So they're just like F9. Sure, all right, great,
Fast
great.
and the
We can all go
Furious
home.
Venus Drift. I think they're supposed to go to space in this one. I read that somewhere.
I don't know if that was ever agreed upon. I don't keep up to date with
I hope they go to space and they get fucking stranded there. That's what I hope happens.
right, and Dom's one facial expression is just frozen forever
Yeah.
in the vastness and emptiness of space. Yeah, that'll be good. But yeah, F9 that was delayed until that was basically a whole year
Yeah.
until well, what I meant to say is like it was about to come out and they were bold enough to push it back a whole year instead of like trying to push it back to just the fall or whatever. I think they really enjoy like the spring and summer releases for these movies, which I guess makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a summer sort of franchise.
Right, for sure. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, that got pushed back to June 25th, 2021. I was a fan of the first Venom. I'm not sure how I feel about Woody Harrelson playing Carnage with that goofy ass orange afro.
It's the wig is bad.
It is in fact not good, but we'll see. And Andy Serkis is directing. I don't know if he has any directing credits under his belt off the
I don't
top of
know.
my
So
head.
I think we talked about this in a previous episode as an aside, or maybe you and I talked about this off the podcast when that was announced.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of someone who understands motion capture and CG and a lot of things that they're going to have to do to make this movie,
Good.
I was going to say interesting, but good. Sure, we'll go with that. All of that is going to be heavily involved. So he definitely knows a lot about that. Now, the trick is, does he know how to translate his knowledge into being a good director? You
Mhm.
know, it's like I think about like sports where the best players are usually pretty awful coaches.
Right.
So I mean, obviously it's not a one-to-one sort of comparison, but I'm interested to see how that turns out. Um,
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
Woody
It'll,
Harrelson. I
mhm.
think that he might make a good Carnage. I just the wig, man, it's bad. It's real bad.
Yeah, like I said, it's not great. So but we'll see. You know, I've been surprised before. So next up we got Top Gun Maverick. We waited a long ass time for a sequel to the original. So what's another couple months, I guess? That got pushed back to July 2nd of next year, 2021.
Which that's a pretty good release date for it.
Yeah,
You know,
I'd
right
say
before
that's
Independence Day.
right. Yeah.
Get everybody all up in their patriotic emotions and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the next one that got pushed back is Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. I can't remember when that was originally slated for. I think it was sometime next February 2021, and it went ahead and got pushed back to July 9th of 2021. So only a couple months, but whatever. The Jungle Cruise movie with Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson, that got pushed back to July 30th of 2021. Halloween Kills, that was originally apparently it was originally supposed to be out this October. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that it was supposed to be this soon. I probably did and just forgot because
Yeah,
life.
that's been filming for that wrapped. I want to say before COVID started, but I
Yeah.
like or before like the COVID related shutdown started, but I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's got to be one of the suckiest things. Like for these movies that have wrapped for quite some time and just haven't, and then like they don't have a place to show it now. Like that's
Yeah,
got to be
and I
pretty
know
rough.
with that one I was especially bummed being such a big Halloween geek.
Sure.
You know that one sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, none of these are great, but I'm just as a personal aside, that one kind of sucked the most for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the it wasn't a reboot. It's just a
The reboot
continuation.
sequel, kind of.
Yeah, the one that I really liked. Yeah, so I was definitely looking forward to this one. Anyways, Dune, of course, that was due out like this month, right? Originally, and
I
then
think so. And then it got pushed to December.
right, and now it is basically pushed a whole year from its
Almost, yeah,
original.
10 months. They just released a trailer for this too, like what,
Hmm.
2 weeks ago, I think, if that.
Yeah, yeah, and we were we meant to bring it up on the podcast whenever the trailer first got released, but then we stopped recording and we were like, fuck, we forgot to mention Dune. So I guess we could talk about it now or in a few minutes if you want. But uh, let's see.
The Batman
Batman.
that got
Yeah,
pushed
that
back a year as well.
it looks like March 2022 is what it's slated for. I mean, it already had a pretty wide or not wide, like a far pushed back date to begin with. So Doctor Strange, the next one, that one is looks like the original release date was May of next year, 2021, and now it's looking like March 25th of 2022. So sad news for Doctor Strange fans. I was definitely a fan of the first one, so that's definitely a bummer. And then yeah, we got Avatar and Star Wars, which I mean, what's his name? James Cameron. He can go fuck himself anyways for taking so goddamn long with Avatar. Not like it was good to begin with. And
He
Star
wants to make
Wars.
them perfect. So I think we've talked about this before. The thing with Avatar is like, from a technical standpoint, from like a pushing the cinematic experience standpoint forward,
Mm-hmm.
or from pushing the cinematic experience forward standpoint, that movie is amazing.
Right.
In terms of a movie, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's basically the same rinse, wash, and repeat kind of premise that a billion movies before it have had, and it's just so tired. And you're like, I mean, there were so many people willing to overlook that just for the, like you said, the CG and the special effects and the groundbreaking
Yeah.
ness of all that. But yeah.
Some late breaking news: the next Jurassic World movie. I think this just broke right before we started recording. That has
Mhm.
been delayed. I did not catch a date on it, but I know that it's pushed back quite a bit as well.
Yeah, Ted, I don't know if you can hear me, but I am playing the world's smallest violin at the moment.
About the Jurassic World delay.
Yes.
Yeah, like I told you when I texted you, there hasn't been a good Jurassic Park movie since 1996. So I don't know why anybody's excited for it, but it is
And
what it
that
is.
is the correct statement
Yeah.
to make there. It's
What are you
been
gonna do?
quite a while.
Now we listed all those movies, and there are tons more that have been delayed that we didn't cover. We
Hmm.
could spend 3 hours just discussing movies that have been delayed. Um, that would be boring. So instead, we're going to bore you with something else.
Right.
We say all those to say that movie theaters are fucked.
Uh, that is a fair assessment.
Now, interestingly, I've been reading a lot about this because I was worried that theaters were never going to reopen the first
Mhm.
time they closed down. Then, of course, they
Right.
did for I think a month, maybe it's been maybe not even quite that long.
I think it's been at least 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, a short amount of time,
Mhm.
and now they're closing again. Which, look, I understand. I I'm of two minds about this. On the one hand, I understand them not wanting to be responsible for it from both a business perspective as well as just a moral perspective.
Mhm.
But I think it's the wrong move because if you look at potential super spreader events, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not a COVID denier, I'm not one of those crazy people either, but
Mhm.
sitting in a quiet room away from other people with a mask on, not bunched up together, that seems like a fairly safe place in terms of things you could be doing other than staying at home.
For sure. Like I read all the guidelines that Regal set out that they were going to strictly adhere to. Like they were going to take groups of people that came in and space them at least 6 feet apart. They were going to have a completely cashless system where you can even order your food or your drinks and stuff ahead of time and pick them up. I don't know how that system was supposed to work, but I mean, like the whole nine, like they had this amazing system set up that like made me that much more excited to go back to the movies because I was like, they fucking figured it out. Like this whole thing sounds like something that would work. Plus, like you said, Ted, everyone would be wearing masks except when they're eating food, obviously. And everyone's like facing in one direction. It's not like two people are like facing each other. Yeah, it just seemed like, I don't want to say foolproof, but a safe way to resume going back to the movies. And
Right.
yeah.
And again, in terms of things that you could be doing, comparatively speaking, it seems like going and seeing a movie in the theater is much safer than like going to dinner, for instance, where
Right.
you're not wearing a mask. You could conceivably go see a movie and never take your mask off. Now, look, again, we're not doctors, either one of us. So don't take our word as gospel. Use some common sense for one thing, but also follow a lot of the
The CDC guidelines.
I was going to say, yeah, a lot of the guidelines you see that are like, hey, here's how we think to be safe. You know,
Hmm.
I'm not an expert. I'm not a complete dummy, but I also don't run a movie theater, so I don't know. My guess would be streaming is going to win out.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, I, I say that and I stand by that, but interestingly, it doesn't seem like a lot of the movies that have been released, or at least it doesn't seem like some of the movies that have been released as digital downloads
Hmm.
have been very successful.
No.
I say that as released to stream alternative to being shown in theaters as a new release.
Right. Yeah. I think the most successful one, quote unquote, is Onward. I think that was originally slated, if you can even count Onward, because I think that was maybe in theaters or about to hit theaters, and then Disney just decided to drop it on Disney Plus, and uh, just as like a, coronavirus sucks, we're giving you this. But yeah, like you said, I think you're kind of referring to like Mulan. Um, I'm having trouble thinking of like some of the others that have dropped. It hasn't been a whole lot.
No, and most of the big tentpole kind of movies that would have released in this time frame since lockdown originally began, they're not going to be released digitally if they can help it. You know,
Right.
that's why you see so many movies like Black Widow, for example. They expected to make a lot of money off of that movie, so they're going to push it back and hope that theaters recover. Now, some movies have been more successful than others. Mulan was basically a fucking tire fire of a disaster. It
Yeah.
made virtually no money streaming in the US and it bombed in China also, which Disney really counted on being a big market.
Hmm.
For a lot of reasons, it bombed. I am not a geopolitical expert, so I'm not going to pretend to know all of them. I just, you can look and read all the articles for yourselves on why people are speculating that it bombed. But I think a big reason is it's just not a good movie. That's what a
Yeah.
lot of people are saying is like, regardless of all the politics that may or may not be tied up into it, the movie's just not good.
Yeah, and I mean the joke's on those people for still holding out hope that Disney is going to make a good live action remake of a movie. Like they're pretty much 0 for 500 now. Like there hasn't been a good one.
Yeah,
There's been decent to terrible ones. I don't know personally where Mulan falls on there because I wasn't a huge fan of the original. I appreciate the hell out of the original, but it wasn't my favorite. And of course, I have not seen the new live action remake, but I know that tons of people had issue with it not being a musical or there wasn't really any music in it to begin with. The dragon, whatever. It was originally voiced by Eddie Murphy, I believe, and whatever that dragon character's name was, I forget.
Mushu, I think.
Yeah, that's right. He's not in it, so people had major issues with those couple of really big things that they did not decide to translate to the live action remake.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel like you kind of said it either, just a second ago or previously, it was kind of doomed to fail from the start.
Yeah. Like I said, also some movies have been more successful. I know Bill and Ted has been
Hmm.
fairly successful. Now, I don't know that it would have made more money in theaters compared to what it did on streaming.
Hmm.
I know that some of the early adopters of streaming, like Invisible Man, it did fairly well as a digital release. I don't know the exact numbers, and I don't know that anybody really truly knows the exact numbers outside of the studios. But I seem to recall it doing fairly well and becoming modestly profitable.
Hmm.
Um, but movies like that, movies like The Invisible Man, movies like Bill and Ted, they don't cost a lot to make. Now, when I say a lot, I'm talking about comparative to other films,
Sure. Yeah.
right? Now, $30 million is a lot of fucking money, no matter how you stretch it.
Hmm.
But compared to something like Tenet, for example, that is alleged to have cost somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 million, all told. You know, it
Because
becomes
Nolan's got to record with the IMAX cameras and
yeah,
all that.
it becomes a different sort of discussion. Um, Interesting side note about Tenet. Um, there's a scene in the film, and this isn't a spoiler to any major plot point, because I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But I've read that there's a scene involving a C-130 aircraft, which is a large aircraft,
Hmm.
or a 747 aircraft, some sort of large plane, and it was actually cheaper to actually use the giant aircraft and shoot at it than it would have been to do that scene in CG, which
Oh my
amuses the
god.
shit out of me. Um, they literally built a set and crashed a plane basically, and it was cheaper than doing CG, and it also looks better. So
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
now I do think that for the movies that tried to open theatrically, which there haven't been many,
No,
and
not a lot.
predominantly most of the ones I've seen um, that have been released, not seen as in gone to theaters and watched, but have noticed have been released, I should say. They seem to be either smaller movies that
Hmm.
probably wouldn't have done super well anyway,
Right.
um, or I know a couple of foreign films were released as well. I know there was a big Chinese movie called the 800, I believe. It was never going to make a lot of money with U.S. audiences, and then Tenet is apparently not making a lot of money either,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because again, it cost a fucking boatload to make, and if that movie isn't making money, odds are that was probably a big reason why studios decided to push their films back, because they were like, well, Nolan, who basically bleeds money at the box office, um, if he's not making any money, odds are we're not either. Now, I think some movies probably would have done well. I think Tenet is a little heady. So even
Hmm.
if it is a Nolan movie and he's got a big following and is very well respected and all that, it's pretty heady. So it's not going to be easily digested like something like Black Widow, which is not to say Tenet is high art and Black Widow is trash.
Yeah.
Just that Black Widow has the established following of 20 some odd Marvel movies before it, whereas Tenet is a new story, albeit granted by a popular director. It's still a new story. It's kind of depressing.
Yeah. I think one of the big things, I was thinking about this earlier, one of the issues with the theaters opening back up, but not seeing just a flood. like the floodgates opening up of people coming back to the movie theater is because there's still tons of people without jobs. I mean, people had a hard enough time beforehand, before the pandemic, of justifying going to the movies, and spending upwards of $30 and $40, to just to see a movie and a drink or two. So with all that, I mean, like I said, it was super expensive to go to the movies to begin with, but you pile on top of that, they're opening and it's exciting, but at the same time, there's all these people out of work and they're living on like a third or a fourth of what they're used to making. So people really only have money for the bare essentials. Um, it's yeah, it's kind of a depressing time, and not doesn't really have a super hopeful future to look forward to, unfortunately. I mean, I'm trying to remain positive about it. Like, really, that's all you can do.
We're all fucked to the end. So, David, we've talked a lot about how movies are getting delayed and some of the reasons for that. What do you think is going to happen in terms of, where movies go from here?
Right, like the evolution of the releases.
Right.
So if it, hypothetically speaking, if movie theaters, a year from now still aren't open, and it's not looking like they aren't going to be open at all or whatever, kind of like what you were saying at the beginning, streaming is going to be the new norm. Like, we already got pretty comfortable with staying at home and watching TV and movies at home, like, because it got relatively inexpensive to set up a home theater system. I feel like if there was going to be some sort of evolution moving past movie theaters, it's going to be kind of like what Mulan and a few others did, where the initial release is like $30, and you pay for that, but you get like the digital download, and you get it, to keep forever, quote unquote. I know that's another discussion that we've had, the legitimacy or validity of your digital downloads that you actually pay for, and whether or not you actually own them. But that's kind of my thoughts. Is just movies becoming more a part of like the streaming landscape, releasing. And I mean, I really don't have a whole lot of ideas when it comes to
Right.
the logistics of releasing them on streaming services. Maybe there will be like a movie theater streaming service where you can, where it's like theatrical releases, but so it'll be like the Netflix of theatrical releases, maybe.
Right.
One thing that I thought would be kind of fun is like a drive-in theater renaissance. Like, I know that they're pretty old school, and back in the day they kind of worked out well. It's all speculation,
Right.
and
I
guessing.
I definitely would like to see. I like drive-ins. I like the idea of drive-ins, and I'd
Yeah.
like to see a little bit of a renaissance with that. I do know that some drive-in theaters have stayed operational or are
Hmm.
resuming operations and seem to be doing fairly well. But I mean, it's a pretty safe. Again, that's a relative term.
Hmm.
Alternative to some other things that you could be doing. I mean, if you think about it, you're leaving your home and getting in your car, and you're not getting out really
Right.
anywhere unless you choose to. So you can go, and we have a driving theater fairly close to where we are. It's about 40 minutes
Hmm.
east or southeast.
Yeah, I think
And
it's,
it's
yeah.
fairly inexpensive. I think it's 12 or 15 bucks a car, which that's basically the cost of one movie ticket in a
Right.
theater.
Yeah.
So, um, I would like to see that. I know I've seen some drive-ins are doing special engagements, um, similar to how some like sit-in theaters are doing the. I know Regal called them like the Regal Classics or the Regal Throwbacks or the
Right.
$5 movies.
Yeah.
Drive-ins. Some drive-ins I've seen are doing something similar where they're having like mini festivals. I guess would be one way to
Right.
describe it, or like
Yeah, and like
uh,
double features.
double and triple features, which is cool. I said it before and I stand by it. I think that streaming, if theaters stay closed down, streaming is going to win the day.
Hmm.
I don't want theaters to stay closed down selfishly, if nothing else. I love going to the theater. To me, no matter how good the home theater system is, unless you have a real top of the line system, there's no competition.
No, yeah, and with what I said, I don't want that to get misconstrued as I side with the side of streaming. I definitely 100% agree with what you say. There's no substitution for getting in your car, driving to the theater, meeting your friends, getting your sody pop and popcorn, and sitting in the dark with a bunch of strangers staring at a giant screen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's literally nothing else like it. You can't replicate that in your own house. I don't
Yeah.
care how goddamn big your projection screen is.
Yeah, I mean, no matter, I think we've all had bad experiences at the theater with bad crowds or people
Sure.
talking, what have you, and I would still take that.
Hmm.
The good far outweighs the bad, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, it's kind of up in the air. It depends on what happens with COVID, and I don't think anybody really knows, other than the people that let out of the lab, know what is happening with COVID. Um, so I would like to see a point where movie theaters come back. I'm curious though, something I've been reading about and something I've been kind of thinking about. If the major players in theaters go out of business, so let's say Regal and Cinemark and Alamo Drafthouse and all these major theater chains or semi-major theater chains go kaput.
Hmm.
Do you think that someone else steps in and tries to take over and open up a new theater chain? So somebody like Netflix or Amazon or Disney or what have you.
Hmm. I don't know.
It's interesting, it's interesting to consider. From my, this is kind of my game theory tree about it. Um, it doesn't make sense for Netflix to do it. They've always been a streaming service.
Hmm.
Now I know that they have on occasion done like they've rented out theaters to play their originals to qualify for Oscar runs. They did that for The Irishman, but that is a far cry from just running and operating a theater chain.
Right.
Disney could do it. I mean, they already have the biggest share of really the popular movie going segment.
Yeah.
Um, because Disney obviously plus the Marvel Cinematic Universe plus they now own 20th Century Fox, so the largest chunk of popular movies and movies that people go see are already owned in some way by Disney. So they could do it, but they just launched Disney Plus, so why wouldn't they just pimp that and say, hey, the only way to see our movies is through our app or through our
Hmm.
streaming service?
Right.
One that's interesting, and there's not really anything that's been leaked or rumored about that they would do this, but it's an interesting thing to think about, like I said, is Amazon.
Yeah.
The fact is, they are a giant company. They have a stupid amount of money, and they have shown that they're willing to try
The brick and mortar thing.
the well, not just the brick and mortar thing, because they do have the Amazon stores. I was going to say try different things. That's just something to think about, because they have their own studio that releases on, of course, their Amazon Prime Video app. I believe they have also had some small theatrical runs.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe maybe in 5 years we're talking about how for an extra $10 a month you get Prime Theater or something.
Yeah.
I hope not, because I like the way theaters are now.
Yeah. I've given a little bit of thought to during this time when they're closed down, like things that they can do once theaters open or reopen when and if to ensure safety, but also on the at the same time making sure that those investments aren't just warranted because of the virus. Like one thing that I thought of, and this isn't things that I've heard of, theaters thinking about trying. This is just, a random thought that came to my head. Like, what if theaters like gutted out like a third of their seats so that there's, kind of like the gaps in between the first row where the handicap seating is, where you have like two or three seats together, and then you have a gap where a wheelchair seat would be, and then you have another, set of two or three seats,
Right.
maybe something like that. But then, they would have to like split the difference on these kinds of decisions, like ones that would make sense to have on a permanent basis even after the virus is over, hypothetically speaking, that it
Hmm.
does, you know go away. uh, so I don't know, maybe something like that. I don't know, but
Yeah, one cool thing I saw, I believe this was Alamo Drafthouse, but I could be wrong. They were offering like you could rent the whole theater out for a flat rate, something like we'll say it was like $300 for a movie,
mhm,
and you got the whole theater. And you think, well, $300 is a lot of money, but then you think, well, I've got the whole theater. I can probably get 10 people together and chip in $30, and they're not that much worse off than if they had gone to a regular movie screening, and we get
sure,
the whole theater to ourselves.
right,
Um, Now there were some caveats to that. I think you also had to like buy dinner. That's why I think it was Alamo Drafthouse, because it was one of the theater chains that you got like a meal and alcohol.
right.
So I think it was like $300 to rent the theater, plus you had to have like $200 worth of food and beverages. So you're looking at like $500 Saturday night, which again, with 10 or 15 people, that's what, $35 to $50 a person roughly.
Yeah, not
That's still
bad.
not a terrible amount of money. Or like David said, there are a lot of people that are in much worse financial situations right now because of Corona, which, that is trash. Corona's trash, basically.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm depressed now. Let's stop talking about this and get on to something else better.
I guess we can talk about briefly the stuff we got coming up for the rest of this month. I know we promised on ye old social media, and especially the Facebook group, excuse me, that we were going to try and keep all the topics this month on the spooky side. And so far, we're doing great. Our first episode of the month is definitely a topic that scares the shit out of us. The idea of movie theaters possibly not being a thing. But coming up next week, we are. This was actually suggested by you, Ted. I think you said this movie had a recent anniversary, or a anniversary of its theatrical release. Isn't that right?
Yeah, the original premiere.
Of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the OG, of course. And I believe if nothing comes up, we will be joined once again by Shauna Hoyt, who has been featured on a few other horror themed episodes in the past. I think the last one that she was on, it wasn't
Psycho.
Psycho. Thank you. Yeah, she was featured on Psycho. She was featured on the
Friday
Friday the
the 13th.
13th watch along, and I want to say one or two others maybe, but yeah. Like I said, if all goes according to plan and nothing comes up, she will be joining us for that one. We'll be excited to have her back on. It's always a treat when she comes on because we're two babbling idiots, and she is fantastic, and she knows her shit when it comes to anything and everything horror related, including movies, books, stories, etc. So that'll be fun. I believe, Ted, I think you're going to sit this one out, but we're going to do a Boys season 2 recap. And then we will wrap up the spooky month with our uh, second little, what do you want to call it? Second part 2 of informal paranormal series that we got going on, and it'll be ghosts, spooky ghosts. So yeah, if you have any ideas on talking points regarding ghosts, ghost stories, urban legends, yada yada yada, we would love to hear them. You can hit us up on, of course, any of our social media that has been mentioned, especially our Facebook group. Yeah, Ted, you got anything else before we sign off?
Yeah, one last thing before we sign out of here, David, or I guess one of two, I should say. First being shit that doesn't suck. For this week, I have chosen Shaun of the Dead, a romantic comedy with zombies, as it was billed. I saw this movie. I had just graduated from high school. I think right around the time this movie came out, and to this day, it's one of my favorite movies. I've seen it. I say this about a lot of movies. I've literally seen this movie probably 400 times.
Dude, it's so good.
I literally watched this movie every day for a month and a half straight. Um,
The Batman soundtrack, throw it.
Throw it, yeah. I quote it like literally every day. Some line from this movie I quote almost probably literally every day. Like I said, I just made my girlfriend watch it, and I think she enjoyed it. She didn't break up with me, so I'm taking that as a good sign.
Yeah, that's a good sign. That's
Yeah, but it's so funny. Some of my all time favorite gags in any film are in this one, and I just watched it Saturday or Sunday, and I'm probably going to watch it by the end of the week just because I'm thinking about it again. So, Shaun of the Dead, great fucking movie.
yeah, that's it doesn't get any more classic than that. I can't remember what episode I brought that up on, and you know what? I think it was, and this is kind of topical actually. I've been doing the hashtag 31 days of horror on the social medias, just like I did last year, but with a slight spin. But last year, this was one of my 31 movies that I picked. And I believe part of my verbiage in the post was that it was my favorite zombie movie. I know it's not your quote unquote typical zombie movie where there's little to no humor in it, but it's still a zombie movie. And it's the hill that I will die on. That it is my favorite. So yeah, good choice. But for my shit that does not suck, I watched recently for the first time Gerald's Game, which came recommended again when I posted. I want to say last week or a couple days before October started, asking for suggestions because with the hashtag 31 days of horror that I was doing, the spin that I was putting on it was instead of movies that I posted, all movies that I had seen before and liked, I wanted to watch some new ones. And so naturally, I asked for some suggestions, and this came up. I forget exactly who suggested it. And I gotta say, it's pretty fucking good. It I don't want to say it's a little slow to start, but it takes a turn that I did not see. And that turn is a very Stephen King esque kind of turn where it like turns and then turns again. And you're like, oh. So, in that right, I feel like it is one of the better Stephen King book to movie adaptations, at least of his contemporary uh, works, or in terms of like book to movie adaptations that are the movie is more contemporary. No spoilers, of course, but yeah, I mean, the premise is that husband and wife, they go out on a wilderness vacation in a very remote place and try and rekindle their love. He has a heart attack while she is handcuffed to the bed. They were getting kinky, and yeah, he dies, and then craziness ensues. So yeah, go watch it if you have the chance. It is streaming currently on Netflix.
Right on. One last thing before we wrap up, some unfortunate news today, and that is the passing of guitar god Eddie Van
Mm,
Halen.
yeah, thanks for bringing this up.
I can't speak for anyone but myself. I think that this probably is true for a lot of people, but I remember being a teenager, or a younger kid, and wanting to learn to play guitar, and somebody playing Eruption,
Mm.
and just being like,
Yeah, no, he definitely had those guitar licks where you listen to it and you're like, you just know that it was him. That's Van Halen. I was blasting it from my phone while I was giving the kids a bath tonight. I was just like stomping my foot and like fucking Panama.
so yeah, rest in peace to him, and a lot of thoughts and prayers to his family and friends.
Yeah,
Blast on Van Halen, in his honor.